The dim glow of hospital lights flickered against the sterile white walls of Westwood Medical Center, the steady hum of medical equipment filling the silence. The sharp scent of antiseptics mixed with the fading aroma of flowers. Gifts from visitors who had long since stopped coming. In room 307, Nathan Cole lay motionless, his body connected to machines that monitored every breath, every faint heartbeat. Once, he had been a man of power, a name that echoed through boardrooms, a force that shaped industries. But now, all of that had faded into nothingness. His days no longer revolved around million-dollar deals, but rather the slow, mechanical beeping of monitors. He was no longer a titan of industry, just a man trapped in a body that refused to move, suspended between life and oblivion, with no one left to fight for him. Charlotte Evans, a 25-year-old nurse with 2 years of experience, entered the room with quiet determination. Though young, she had already built a reputation for her dedication and compassion. She believed that no patient, no matter how hopeless their case seemed, should be left alone. She approached Nathan's bedside, preparing to change his bandages, and like every day before, she spoke, despite knowing that he would never answer. Charlotte worked methodically, her hands moving with practiced ease as she removed the old bandages, cleaned the wounds, and replaced them with fresh ones. It was routine, a process she had repeated countless times, but she never treated it as mere procedure. She did it with care, with patience. She didn't have to talk to him, but the silence in the room was suffocating, so she spoke. "Nathan, you wouldn't believe the morning I had," she began, her tone light with a hint of amusement. "The bus I take every day broke down in the middle of the road. I had to walk 3 blocks under the scorching sun just to get here on time." She paused, watching him. No reaction, just stillness. Charlotte exhaled softly but pressed on. "And Mr. Jenkins down the hall, he called me Little Sunshine again today. He complains about hospital food all the time, but I think that's just his way of showing affection." No response, no movement. But Charlotte didn't mind. Deep down, she believed Nathan could hear her. The days blurred together. She told him about everything. Her mother's struggle with heart disease, the endless stack of medical bills that kept her awake at night, the dream she held onto of one day opening a clinic for those who couldn't afford health care. People called Nathan an empty shell, a man lost in the void. But Charlotte felt otherwise. She didn't know why she cared so much, only that she couldn't walk away. She couldn't stop trying. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Sunlight filtered through the white curtains, casting soft golden streaks on the sterile walls of room 307. Charlotte was changing Nathan's bandages like she did every day. Her hands moved with practiced ease, her touch gentle. As she worked, she hummed a familiar tune, a habit she had developed without even realizing it. Then, just as she was adjusting the gauze on his arm, she felt it, a faint movement. Nathan's hand, lifeless for months, twitched ever so slightly. Charlotte froze, her breath hitched in her throat. She stared at his fingers, waiting, willing them to move again. But nothing happened. She shook her head, telling herself it was probably nothing, a muscle spasm, an involuntary reflex. But the thought lingered, gnawing at the edges of her mind. Before leaving for the night, she turned back for one last look at him. That strange feeling still sat heavy in her chest. Something was changing. She could feel it. The storm rolled in the following evening. The wind howled through the hospital corridors, raindrops hammering against the windows like a somber melody. Inside room 307, the dim glow of the monitors cast faint shadows on the sterile white walls. The only sound was the rhythmic beeping of Nathan's heart monitor, steady and unwavering. Charlotte's shift had ended hours ago, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Something inside her whispered that tonight Nathan shouldn't be alone. She pulled up a chair beside his bed, gently taking his hand in hers. "You know," she murmured, gazing at the storm outside, "I used to love nights like this. When I was little, my dad and I would sit by the window and count the seconds between lightning and thunder. He told me that if I could measure the storm, it wouldn't be so scary." She let out a quiet chuckle, though her eyes were distant. But after he died, Storms just felt lonely. A single tear slipped from her eye, landing softly on Nathan's hand. She blinked rapidly, embarrassed by her own emotions. But then, it happened. The hand in hers squeezed, ever so faintly. Charlotte went completely still. She wasn't breathing. Her mind raced between hope and disbelief. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice trembling. This time the response was stronger. His fingers curled slightly against hers, weak but unmistakably real. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She shot up from her chair, her hands fumbling over the monitors, trying to steady herself. "You can hear me. Try moving again." A pause. A beat. And then a soft twitch of his fingers. Charlotte's breath hitched. Her heart pounded so violently she could hear it echoing in her ears. Was she imagining it? Could this really be happening? 1,000 questions raced through her mind, but before she could process them, the impossible happened. Nathan's eyes fluttered open. A choked sob escaped her lips as she slammed the emergency call button, her hands trembling so much she nearly missed it. Nathan's awakening became the talk of Westwood Medical Center. The doctors called it a miracle, but Charlotte knew it was more than that. It was proof that her faith had never been in vain. In the days that followed, Nathan's recovery progressed faster than anyone expected. His voice was weak, his movements slow, but his eyes, they were full of life. And they were always searching for Charlotte. She was the only person he trusted. When the doctors checked on him, when other nurses assisted in his therapy, he remained indifferent. But whenever Charlotte entered the room, a faint smile would touch his lips, a light flickering in his gaze. One afternoon, as Charlotte guided his arm through a simple range of motion exercise, Nathan spoke. "Thank you." She froze, her breath catching in her throat. "For what?" Nathan met her eyes, his gaze saying more than his words ever could. "For not giving up on me." Charlotte smiled, but something inside her shifted. There was something between them, something real. But before she could process it, the door burst open with a force that made the walls tremble. Margaret Cole, Nathan's mother, stood there, her icy gaze sweeping over the room like a storm about to break. "Charlotte Evans?" Her voice was sharp, poised with authority. Charlotte stood, instinctively taking a step back. "Yes, ma'am?" Margaret strode inside, her heels clicking against the tile. "What exactly do you think you're doing with my son?" Charlotte furrowed her brows. "I'm caring for him?" Margaret let out a cold, humorless chuckle. "No, you're manipulating him." Nathan tensed. "Mother." "Don't." Margaret cut him off, her gaze never leaving Charlotte. "Do you think I don't see it? The way you hover over him, the way he looks at you? Do you honestly believe a simple nurse could capture Nathan Cole's attention without an ulterior motive?" Heat rose in Charlotte's chest. She had never cared about Nathan's wealth or status, but the accusation? It hurt more than she expected. She opened her mouth to protest, but Nathan spoke first. His voice, though strained, was firm. "It's enough, Mother." Margaret turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You're still too weak to see it clearly. I'm only trying to protect you from opportunists." Charlotte felt something deep inside her crack, as if the very foundation of her heart had been shaken. She turned to Nathan, searching his face, desperately hoping, praying, that he would defend her, that he would tell his mother she was wrong. But the hesitation in his eyes wasn't just a flicker. It was a hesitation that spoke volumes. It was enough to break her. She took a deep breath, keeping her voice steady. "If that's what you think, then I'll go." Nathan's face fell. "Charlotte, wait." But she was already turning, walking out the door before the tears could fall. The days after Charlotte left were unbearable. Room 307, once filled with warmth, now felt like a prison. Nathan forced himself through therapy, but every movement felt meaningless without her. Nights were the worst. Lying in the sterile white bed, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the echo of her voice. He had fought so hard to come back, but now, without her, he felt just as lost as before. He wasn't living. He was merely existing. Nothing seemed to matter. The doctors praised his recovery, The nurses called it a miracle, but none of it meant anything without her. He had tried reaching out, calling, texting, no reply. He had asked other nurses about her only to learn that Charlotte had transferred to another hospital. And then Nathan knew he couldn't let this end like this. That day, he stood before the press for the first time since waking up. A press conference had been scheduled to discuss his miraculous recovery, but Nathan had other plans. The room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing, microphones waiting for his words. But instead of discussing his health, Nathan took a deep breath, gripping the mic. "I'm not here to talk about my recovery." Silence. Nathan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on him. The cameras flashed, reporters scribbled furiously, waiting for a statement about his miraculous recovery. But Nathan wasn't here to talk about that. His throat tightened. His palms felt clammy. He had faced corporate battles, made billion-dollar decisions, but nothing had ever terrified him as much as this moment. He exhaled slowly. "I'm here to talk about the person who saved me." The room fell silent. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Confusion spread like wildfire, but Nathan didn't care. There was only one person he was speaking to. There was only one person he hoped was listening. "Charlotte Evans, if you're watching this, I need you to know that what we had wasn't just gratitude. It was real, and I love you." Across the city, in a small apartment, Charlotte sat frozen in front of the TV. The world around her faded into nothing. Her heart pounded as she listened to Nathan's words, not just to her, but to the entire world. He had chosen her, not out of gratitude, not out of obligation, but because he truly loved her. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks as Nathan's words echoed in her mind. Her heart screamed for her to run to him, but fear held her back. What if she was too late? What if she had misunderstood everything? But then she saw it. The raw emotion in his eyes, the way his voice trembled when he said her name. And suddenly, nothing else mattered. She grabbed her coat and ran, her heartbeat matching the desperate rhythm of her footsteps. She raced through the streets, her heart leading the way, knowing one thing for certain: she couldn't lose him again. At the hospital, Nathan sat in the physical therapy room, staring blankly at the television screen where the press conference had just ended. He thought she wouldn't come. He thought he had lost her for good. And then the door burst open. Charlotte stood there, breathless, eyes glistening with tears. Without thinking, Nathan stood up. Pain shot through his legs, but he didn't care. He took a step toward her. And then she was in his arms, sobbing against his chest. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I should have never left. I love you, Nathan." Nathan held her tighter, as if letting go meant losing her forever. "You came back. That's all that matters." After reuniting, Nathan was determined to make a full recovery, not just for himself, but for Charlotte. Physical therapy was grueling. Some days, every step felt like torture, pain radiating through his body. But whenever he wanted to give up, Charlotte was always there, holding his hand, smiling at him, reminding him that he had fought too hard to come back, just to stop now. Slowly, Nathan grew stronger. The pain lessened, his legs steadier, and one day, he took a step without needing his crutch. "Look at me," Nathan grinned, taking slow but confident steps toward Charlotte. Charlotte clapped her hands like an excited child. "I knew it! I always knew you could do it!" Nathan didn't respond with words. Instead, he suddenly lifted Charlotte into his arms, spinning her around. "Are you crazy?" she squealed, laughing as she playfully smacked his shoulder. "I just wanted to see if I was strong enough to pick you up," Nathan smirked. "And I think I did a pretty good job." The following months were filled with small but beautiful moments of love. In the mornings, they strolled through the park, Charlotte proudly holding Nathan's hand, no longer seeing him as a bedridden patient. In the afternoons, they cooked together, though Nathan was a complete disaster in the kitchen, often spilling ingredients and making Charlotte laugh uncontrollably. At night, they curled up on the couch, watching old movies Nathan had never had time for when he was a busy businessman. One evening, as they sat on the rooftop gazing up at the starry sky, Nathan gently squeezed Charlotte's hand. "I never thought my life could be this happy." Charlotte leaned her head against his shoulder, a soft smile on her lips. "And I never thought I'd find a love like this." Under the vast night sky, surrounded by endless stars, they were no longer nurse and patient. They were two souls who had found each other against all odds, and this time, they would never let go. A year later, their lives had transformed completely. Charlotte had fulfilled her dream. She opened a community clinic, a place where patients who couldn't afford treatment would always have a chance. Every day, she poured her heart into her work, helping those who needed her most. Nathan had left behind the ruthless corporate world, dedicating himself to charity work, using his wealth to make a real difference. But no matter how busy life got, he always made time for the woman who had saved him. And today, he had something special planned. After a long day at the clinic, Charlotte stepped outside, stretching her arms after a long day, then stopped mid-step. Her breath caught in her throat. Nathan stood a few feet away, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. He looked nervous, shifting slightly as he knelt down on one knee, holding a sparkling ring between his fingers. His hands were shaking. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure she could hear it. "Charlotte Evans," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you didn't just save my life. You became my life. Will you marry me?" A laugh bubbled past Charlotte's lips, mixing with the tears spilling down her cheeks. Without hesitation, she nodded. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Nathan stood, pulling her into his arms, capturing her lips in a kiss that held every unspoken promise. In that moment, every hardship, every trial, every moment of doubt faded into nothing. They had found each other, and this time they would never let go.